Three, two, one. Hey, good evening, everybody. My name's John York. I'm the chair of the Healthcare Club, and the Healthcare Club and the Marketing Club are delighted this evening to host this webinar on February 25th. The title being Connecting Providers and Patients, Navigating Haystacks and Needles, which is really what's the latest in social media and digital marketing. And we're featuring Debbie Donovan, who's the Director of Communications and Corporate Identity at Endogastric Solutions up in the Silicon Valley area. My name is John York, and I have a few housekeeping things and a quick intro of Debbie before we start the meeting. What I would like each of you to do is quickly type in your name so that we know that you're present. Can you hear me? Okay. Okay, super. I see everybody's typing in, which is great. All right, number two is, this is going to go for about an hour. And we're going to do 40 minutes of presentation. How we're going to do it is we're going to do two 20-minute sessions. So about 20 minutes into the presentation, I'm going to stop and have 5 to 10 minutes for questions. We can do it one of two ways. One is we could do it vis-a-vis the chat function. And then two is that if you are on the 800 number, just raise your hand and we will acknowledge you. But due to technical challenges, we may end up just working with the chat function this evening. The third point that I want to make here is a session evaluation. Your feedback is very helpful for our future webinars, and at the end of the session, you will see a link that will pop up when we close out the session. Take a minute or two, complete it, and once I have that information, we will forward on a link to you for the archive since we are taping this program. And then last but not least is just a quick reminder, we already have a speaker ready for our next webinar, which will be in April. The featured speaker will be Audrey Herbs, who used to be the Vice President of Business Development for Syntax and Principal for Kawa. And she's going to talk about business plans and tech assessments, the two sides of the coin. And a little thing about Audrey is for the last 10 years, she's been teaching sessions on business development and marketing plans through UC Berkeley. So actually, Deb has been one of the faculty of this great course, and that's how I got to know her. So real quick about Deb. Deb is the Director of Endogastric Solutions, but she's been involved with marketing in a variety of capacities, including being Director of Atlantis Medical Systems, a Senior Manager at Intuitive, and management positions at Conceptus, Hyphon, and Summos. She is one of the what we call Three Wise Dames, which is a healthcare blog on digital marketing and social media for healthcare and for the life sciences. She also is a faculty member for the UC Berkeley Extension course that focused on marketing plans, and that's where I met Deb a year ago. And she's probably one of the most dynamic speakers I've seen on the topic. She's so dynamic, I asked if I could spend a whole afternoon with her to learn more about this. She's a member of the International Association of Business Communicators, and she brings a degree with a bachelor's in public relations from the University of Southern California. So with that said, I am going to ask Deb to take over here and to run through the first half of the session, and then we'll open up for some questions. And Deb, take her away.
Great, thanks. Hello, everybody. It's a real honor to be asked to do this presentation today, and thanks to John York for inviting me. So let's dive right in. We don't have too much time to get through the first section of this presentation tonight. And I really like this image because I think if you have been in marketing for any length of time, if you don't recognize that marketing has changed fundamentally, then you really do have your head in the sand. And one of my goals for this presentation for you all today is that you will actually take your head out of the sand and not just be able to look at everything that's happening, but be empowered and excited about what's going on in this space and specifically how it is impacting healthcare. I will tell you that I do not speak for Endogastric Solutions, but that is my current day job. And I have been utterly and totally fascinated by all of this since I attended online. I listened to the FDA presentations in November of 2009. The FDA ran a public forum about social media and healthcare, and it was quite riveting, I must tell you. After that, I just thought I have got to spend some time to learn more about this. As you can see, I've been a professional communicator my whole life. I started my life as an agency person and then moved into the corporate side of things. So with that, I will go on to the next. Here is how things have fundamentally changed. We used to have just a one-way, we as company people talking to consumers. It was a one-to-many relationship with our audience. Social media has changed communications in two fundamental ways. Consumers used to talk to consumers. We've known that for a long time, but it was always in a very not broadcasted sort of way. So that's been a major change, is that conversation that's been happening all these years, or decades and practically for millennia, that has changed, and now those conversations between individuals is now public information. Think about Twitter and how information exchanged so quickly through Twitter. Consumers to company. In the old days, you might call the customer service line. In fact, you might do that now. But if you listen to, I'm a big fan of NPR and Marketplace in particular, and they talked the other day about how you get customer service to listen to you if they're not listening, and the way you do it is you go on Twitter. And there are lots and lots of great case studies of customer service being conducted, at least initially, through Twitter and its interactions. And big, huge brands in all sectors of the economy are winning the marketing wars and the sales and the loyalty wars through social media and their openness, transparency, and their level of engagement with their customers. And that is true as well for healthcare. So one of the things that I think is really important is to think about how we've traditionally looked at marketing, and that is you're looking for that needle in a haystack. And I'm sure for those of you that have been in the medical or healthcare, pharma, or biotech, you've probably heard, well, all we really need to do is put an advertisement on the Super Bowl. And having just had the Super Bowl, that is like finding a needle in a haystack. Yes, you can blast your message to all of this hay, but there's really only one person or a handful of people that need to hear it and are going to do something about it. What social and digital has done is it's actually created whole haystacks filled with needles. And those needles are your patients and your ultimate buyers of your product, whether it's a pharmaceutical, a diagnostic test, or a procedure that a device is used in. And remember, that's my bend. I spend a lot of time thinking about patients, their disease states, and helping them connect to physicians that will do procedures for which my company sells a device. So that's really where my emphasis has been. So when we look at adoption, traditional adoption has been very top-down or bottom-up. It doesn't really matter how you look at it, but it's been, first we have to attract the doctor's attention with clinical information. We have to train the doctor or inform the doctor of how to either write the script or order the test or do the procedure. The doctor figures out which site of service they're going to do this in, ambulatory service center, their hospital, or their office, depending on the procedure and its risks associated. And then the doctor may or may not educate the patient well or not well. That's the way we used to find those needles in haystacks. But now, with digitally enabled adoption, what it means to us is that there are lots of haystacks out there. The trick is to go find them and engage with the haystacks. And later on, you'll see that there are lots of places where we can go find these people, not necessarily in what I call the big three, Google, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. There are all kinds of other places to find these patients. And so now you can not only influence the patient, you can influence their caregivers, you can influence the physician who might refer the patient on. So primary care physicians are a great audience, or even primary health care providers. So these are those nurse practitioners and physician assistants. In my world, in the device world, you do not need a medical license to make a referral for a procedure necessarily. It's not the same as when you have to write a script for a pharmaceutical So it's a difference, but it's actually a difference that I can take advantage of, because I can talk to a nurse practitioner or physician assistant, and they can actually suggest to the patient, oh, you know what, you should ask the doctor about this procedure. I think it might be helpful for you. So that actually starts to turn the doctor wheel instead of the doctor wheel turning the patients. So it's a different dynamic altogether. And we also know that patients are going on the internet. Every year there's better and better studies. The most recent one that I downloaded was the IMS Institute for Healthcare Informatics, January 2014. It's a great little free white paper called Engaging Patients Through Social Media. We got a special section in here about Wikipedia, which really caught my eye. But on the whole, patients are using, they're influenced most by family and friends, and they do their research on the internet, and yes, they talk to physicians, but they might get triggered by the media. It's all interplayed together. And sort of, there's a piece of marketing that is still true, which is you have to hit someone multiple times. It used to be the 7-time rule or the 8-time rule, depending on which study you look at. And what we see is that is absolutely true, but instead of just the traditional media outlets, we now have all these other media outlets that we can leverage, and they don't cost nearly the amount of money or time to get in as the old outlets used to. So this is some data that I pulled out. I will tell you that I pulled it out in 2009. I'm sure, absolutely certain, that that this piece of the data is probably much different than it has been in 2009, since it's been a while. But the thing I really want to point out here is this is for people who are searching after they had gotten a diagnosis of cancer. So they trust a physician source, but they first look at this, which is the internet, by a huge margin. So back a few years ago, there was a wonderful television commercial where it was for WebMD, in fact, and there was a woman, and she was typing, and her husband had his hand on her shoulder, and you flashed to the screen, and it said breast cancer. And she's doing a Google search or a WebMD search on breast cancer. And we know that that scene gets played out millions of times a day, a week, and a month now. So this is, if you don't think it's happening, it is, and please don't think that it's a young person's thing. One of the fastest growing segments on the internet and in social media is those over 65. They have the time, they have the inclination, and Facebook has really captured that group's attention. The youngins are leaving for other social networks, but the people who actually have insurance and pay bills and have medical problems are in all the places that we want to be engaging with them. So it's very important that not only companies have good websites and hospitals have good websites, but physicians have to have good websites. And this is just a collection of some facts from the 2013 Pew Internet Health Online Report. If you do not subscribe to Pew Internet, I highly recommend it. Every year, it's free information. You get these massive data reports. They spin the data around and write it in different ways. It's a great, great resource. So it's another place that you can go and look and find those key pieces of information. I typically I will scour those to see if the disease state that I happen to be working on happens to be in the top 10 list or whatever. And typically, I've been in the GI arena now for a little while, and it does tend to be on the top 10 list of things people are searching for. So once you are a patient, there's a long road ahead of you, especially if you have something that's difficult to diagnose, or you have an unusual collection of symptoms that are not typical. I'm currently working in the space of gastroesophageal reflux disease, and yes, there's a typical heartburn patient profile, but there is an atypical profile, people who have sinus infections and asthma and weird allergies and other kinds of things that don't make any sense, laryngitis and some other symptoms. They don't necessarily have the traditional classic heartburn, but they have all these other things, and they become very difficult to diagnose. So a patient starts to search, especially if they get into one of these categories where they can't figure out what it is that they're looking for. So you want to be wherever the patient shows up. And there's a couple of ways to do that. One way is, of course, your classic search engine marketing, and I say classic, ha ha ha. It's in this century that we've been doing that. So it is a great way to take a look and see. You can do real-time testing of your market research. You can word test like no other place because you're watching real-time behavior. You do great A/B testing, and it doesn't cost you a fortune. So I really highly recommend search engine marketing, not just for driving volume of web traffic, but actually converting that traffic over to a phone call to a physician, a prescription, a diagnostic test. There's a lot of ways to show that, and I'll get into that in just a second. The other thing to do is most medical device companies, and I'm pretty sure that other sectors within healthcare also have this, and that is we have toolkits of templated materials, and we encourage our physicians and our hospitals to co-market that they have this product or service available to their patients. Most recently, there's been a fair number of brouhaha around Intuitive Surgical and the co-branded stuff that they've been doing with one of their hospitals, I think it's in Indiana. There's been a lot of flack about it, but it is still a pretty typical technique, and it is very effective to get your brand out in front of patients in traditional and newer media outlets. The other thing, don't lose sight of the fact that if you have a sales organization, talking to the referral audience is critical, and they will actually get if you educate those people, and again, I'll talk from a device point of view, it's a little different for pharma, but if you talk to anybody who is in a likely referral situation, they can start feeding you patients really quickly and very efficiently. I like to use the old adage, if you give a man a fish, he eats for a day. If you teach a man to fish, he eats for a lifetime. In this case, the man is the surgeon or the physician. The give is direct to consumer marketing or direct to patient marketing. The teach is referral marketing. And truly, if you educate a referring physician or referring practice, they will keep sending patients to you. There's a few keys to making that work on an ongoing basis, one of which is acknowledging the referrals and reporting back to the referring physician or healthcare provider that the treatment was successful. But that's a pretty easy thing to implement in most cases, especially with the newer EMR systems. So now what I'm going to do is just talk a little bit about how do you monetize digital marketing, because you're going to spend some money to build a website. I highly recommend WordPress, and I've got a little note about that at the end of this presentation that if we can get to it, great. What I wanted to point out to you is you can do all kinds of things on your website. You can do AdWords. You can do, of course, traditional media with public relations activities. You can do partnerships on third-party websites that have information about your disease state, or that might be an author or a blogger. Lots of different people that now create these cottage industries. You obviously have your marketing toolkit, and there's some interesting ways to do content syndication. I can talk a little bit about that on a different day, but I have found a resource that has a branded content syndication service that I use over and over again, and I really love it for my customers and for the patients. So what you end up measuring, and this is the key, we have never been in a time where we could measure the kind of things that we can measure. I measure everything from what words people typed in to see the ad word, which ad they typed in. Then I look at which pages they visited after they landed on the site. Then I look at did they sign up for a newsletter or to stay in touch with us? Did they go to the physician locator? The physician locator on any medical device website is the equivalent of the buy button, if you will, for Amazon. Buy now. Because when you're calling a physician off of the website, you're using it as a phone book. And that is something I actually measure. I measure the date, the time, and sometimes the length of call, and even sometimes I get the zip code of the caller. It's another great service that I use, and I couldn't do my job without it. So again, it's something I can talk about later. But in addition to measuring that funnel, you can also, of course, look at traditional measures. Salesforce.com does a great job with this. If fortunate enough to have an installation of any CRM system, Salesforce is a particularly good one, and they have some great data that you can pull in. You're looking at, are you getting new facilities? You can record the referring physicians in there. How many new users are you pulling in? You've got a lot of different ways to measure, and everything is lovingly date stamped within Salesforce and other CRM activities or systems. So this is this web to revenue relationship, and this is what I was talking about. We've got this nice funnel that you create, and I really recommend that you do this. Believe it or not, Google AdWords is a low-cost product. Analytics, Google Analytics is free. Thank you very much. I love free. I use it whenever I can. And if you put in the money in the right places, then a lot of these measurement tools become very inexpensive, and you put the money where you really need it. I don't put a lot of money into building websites per se. I put money into building themes for my WordPress websites, and then I'm off to the races. As long as I can optimize the basics of, there's not a lot that goes on that's different from company to company. It's really easy for me to just go, okay, bam, get my WordPress site up and start looking at this funnel and putting it together. And you can start optimizing the content and all the other things. So you talk about integrating programs. While I was at Intuitive, and I have to say this program has been modified quite substantially, a piece of it has been modified pretty substantially since I was there, but the basic components are still active, and that is they have a physician locator. It's branded to Intuitive Surgical as the Da Vinci locator. They have stories of patients, because patient stories are the juice that keeps everyone going. And I have a mantra. People laugh at me when I say you can never have enough patient stories, because it's content that is authentic, but it uses all your keywords over and over again. So it's a great way to build your content and to tell stories of real people. And there's a great way to get video for less than $1,000. And you can go to girdhealth.com and to the blog, and you can go take a look at all that stuff. But patient stories is a big piece of it. You want to make sure that your physician and hospital websites are demonstrating that they are using your branded technology. Provide them with content to put on their site. Even better, have them subscribe to a syndication service. I mentioned that a little while ago. And then partnerships. While I was at Intuitive, I had the joy of working with a group called Hister Sisters, founded by a lovely Texan named Kelley. And yes, it really is called Hister Sisters. People kind of laugh at that. But it is really a terrific way. They had some banner sponsorships that had been taken, but nobody had sponsored their patient stories. Nobody had sponsored their calendar and their chat function. And we really dug in there with the founder and figured out what their community needed, and we figured out how to sponsor it, and it's still running. And that sponsorship has been amazing for what the amount of money was spent versus how many new patients were coming and how qualified they were. It was really quite astounding. So finding those gems, they're not always available, but when they are, you just got to ride. You got to make sure that you're in the mix. So when it comes to practice marketing, I know I've mentioned this a couple of times, physicians absolutely have to be involved in their own practice marketing. However, I have been in situations where I have had people tell me, I want to put up a billboard. And then I ask them, if I call your office, is the person at the front desk going to know what the billboard's about? And the answer is no. Okay? Do you have a website that looks like the billboard and talks about the same thing? No. Have you spoken to your own patients? Have you talked to your referring physicians? Have you done these other things? The answer keeps coming back, no. So I simply say, well, you can do a billboard, but you're flushing money down the toilet. Because if you cannot capitalize on the interest that your billboard creates, it's a waste of money. And I have a whole blog post series about practice building and different things you can do. But the first post I ever did on that topic was MVPs, which is most valuable player, which is the people in the office. Conceptus, we learned this very much, that this was a huge deal. The physicians were a little hesitant to talk about permanent birth control, but the people at the front desk were not, and they were doing the intake. So asking every woman 3 questions, whether she was on birth control, was she happy with birth control, and was her family complete. Those 3 questions, get those answered, and then it became really easy to figure out who might be a good candidate for the Assure procedure. So let me show you a little case study. While I was at Intuitive, we had a physician who's a urologist. He'd been trained to do Da Vinci prostatectomy, and he went ahead and he signed up with a service called Practice, Practis. They are the ones that do this syndicated service of branded content. And so he put up his website in March of 2009, and he did some content upgrades. But I mean, basically the thing cost him about $2,500, and it cost him $50 a month for hosting and subscription to the content feed coming in from Intuitive Surgical. So we then added, we layered on, so this is his website. Let me see if I can get this. So his website is this piece right here. And then what we did is we worked with a group called Patient Builder, and they're out of Springfield, Missouri, another one of my favorite vendors, and they created, using the templates that Intuitive had, they created personalized brochures for the prostatectomy. They created a poster. There's that lovely billboard, everybody. This was a print ad. And the reason I know that they were successful and they were happy with how they did this is because the original 3-month schedule was extended another 4 months, and they added more print and billboard advertising to their schedule. And really, this guy did this entire campaign, and you can look at how smooth. I mean, if you saw the billboard and then you walked in the office, you got to see the brochures that looked like the billboard, and if you were on the website, you got to see the brochure, look like the billboard. Everything just went together. This guy spent less than $10,000 to do this. Physicians, in my experience, their initial investment, $2,500 about the middle of the ground. So between $2,000 and $3,000, it's just enough for them to take it seriously, but it's not so much that they say no. They would typically say yes to a $2,500 investment. And up to just a few years ago, you used to be able to compare it to the amount of money they were spending on their Yellow Page ads. But I think that's really going by the wayside. I don't know a website that can be built for $2,500 that's as good as the ones that they build over at Practice, so I'm a big fan. Again, another one of my vendors that I use. So here's the dynamic that I play in a fair amount because I'm a medical device company person. A lot of my products get sold to hospitals, and they are used in the hospital. So my actual buyer is the hospital. The user, or the value-added reseller, if you will, is actually the physician, and the customer is the patient. So there's the whole idea of customer is segmented into these 3 groups: who buys it, who uses it, and then who chooses it. So those are 3 different groups of people. So this is a piece of data that I do not think has changed a whole lot. I collected this again in 2009. Haven't done anything better, but I can tell you that doctors will tell the patient where they're going to perform the procedures. Depending on what state you're in, physicians can or can't, their practices can or can't be owned by a hospital. In California, physician practices cannot be owned by a hospital, but in other states they can. So you'll see a lot of information about that. So that's something that's really important. And the reason is because hospitals now have social media channels. And if you are at all a fan of Broadway, you might recognize this as the creature that is in the Little Shop of Horrors. And the creature is always saying, "Feed me Seymour." And the reason I always laugh about that is because social media channels are like that. They gobble and digest enormous amounts of content, and you cannot overfeed them. They get bigger and more exciting the more you feed them. So that's my little analogy for hospital social media channels. You can keep track of hospital social media channels on something called the Mayo Clinic Social Media Health Network. This used to be a blog and wiki run by someone named Ed Bennett. He transferred it over to his friend Lee Acey at Mayo Clinic, and they now keep that data in that location. If you want to see what other hospitals are doing across the country, it's a great tool for sales reps to have a quick way of looking to see what people are doing in different arenas. The other great place to keep track of what people are doing is there's a social media wiki and a mobile app wiki that is maintained by Dose of Digital. Dose of Digital was originally started by someone named Jonathan Richmond. It has since been switched over, and I'm blanking on the guy. Bill Evans is now the new editor of Dose of Digital. They do a phenomenal job at, they don't post often, but when they do, it's great stuff. I still love this blog post. I know we're going on. It's getting a little moldy. It's 4 years old, but it's still fantastic. They chronicled a warning letter from the FDA. And I know one of the questions that came in advance is, how do you deal with the whole regulatory thing? Well, one of the challenges is that the FDA has not issued guidelines. Remember I said that I was fascinated by the stuff I heard back in 2009 in November. Well, guess what? They have still not issued guidelines. But what they have done is, by default, use existing direct-to-patient and pharmaceutical marketing guidelines, and they have morphed them in several ways and used that as a basis for warning letters. So it's helpful to study those warning letters, because the key thing is still stay on label, don't make comparative claims. I mean, all the classic stuff that you're already doing is it's still the same in social media channels. Same deal. This was a particularly great blog post, and it was a white paper that was included, and it was a very step-by-step, here's how you solve this, share this feature. And I actually have the share this feature installed on several websites. Essentially, it's this little bugger right here in the corner. You probably see that on a lot of different places. You may have used it, yes or no. It's a great way to get your content shareable. And the reason that I love it is because it can be shared into not only Facebook, but also into the different communities that people hang in. And here's what's so regulatory compliant about this. You have the ability to program your indication and your precautions into the information being shared. So, for example, it's very clear on that items number 1 and 2 are the person using this, share this feature. So this is that person's opinion. All the sections 3, A, B, C, D, these are all your materials that are locked down that the person who's posting it can't change. So it's little like handing a brochure out, if you will. Unless they scratch it out or do all kinds of things that would mess with it, then you would know that this isn't the original material. So this is a really good example of one thing that helps things stay compliant with regulatory. This is a particularly interesting blog post that came out at the end of 2011. It was specific to off-label information. However, Jonathan, in his final act on Dose of Digital, actually put this up, and it was a really good guideline about how to handle how social channels should be used when they use social channels as an example. There have been other warning letters that have come out. I encourage you to stay on top of those, because every single time they do a warning letter, you can dig into it and you can figure out exactly what someone did, where they went wrong, and how to avoid doing that. This is another, I just was at Dreamforce 2013. If you want to understand virility, I highly recommend this. It's on YouTube. It's free access. Anybody can go there. It's Dreamforce. And you will remember this because all you have to do is type in, what do Mormons in Paris have to do, and it'll bring up this particular video. It is an hour, but I guarantee it will be the best hour you have spent. If you do not know BuzzFeed or Upworthy or any of the other dozens or so brands that they've created, these guys have a beat on what goes viral. So watch this presentation, because it's a really great lesson on how to make great content. Getting to the regulatory and legal, I remember there was about 3 questions about this. So here's how I do it. First of all, I have this we can mindset, and I have the intention that this can be done. And that's a big issue, because the first thing most regulatory people say is no, right? So we're going to get them to yes. I am a huge proponent of, and this may come from the fact that my father was in quality for most of his career, and document control and those kinds of functions. Write a great quality document. I actually wrote a policy, a social media engagement policy. I have now used it at 2 different companies, and I walk in, and the first thing I do is talk to the regulatory guy, and I get him to say yes to this, and then I show him how it works. It usually takes a couple days and maybe a few weeks before they're comfortable with it, but basically that's what I do. I have some phrases that I use frequently in my SOPs that I write. All approved release documents may be used in whole or in part as content for posting, which helps you answer questions that come out, including but not limited to. Every other day a new social something is developed, so you want to make sure that you don't lock yourself down. Rebroadcasting is a new concept that I've thrown in here, but rebroadcasting of third-party content is allowed, with whatever disclaimers that you have to put on the page. And then the other one is the big one that people freak out about is how do you deal with the adverse event stuff? Well, all you have to do is point to it and say, here's how we're going to deal with adverse events. If we find it, there's a whole series of things that have to happen, and that process is already well articulated in your existing SOPs. I guarantee it. So all you have to do is point to it, and you just have to figure out how you're going to take something that you find online as a comment and move it over into this other realm. And it's really not that hard to do. So those are my tips on getting through regulatory and legal. If you have not had a chance to read the Forrester book, Crowd, I am just blanking out on what it's called, but I have it down later in my presentation in the resources section. What I liked about what Forrester did is they created a ladder of what people do online. And what I like about it is that they modified the ladder and they added conversationalists. They created this ladder before Facebook and Twitter really took off. And when they added conversationalists in here, that's really what the Twitter people are. Honestly, the stat I hear over and over again is things like in Pinterest, 10 to 20% of the content is real or original content. Everything else is reposted or repinned. Be the one creating the content. You don't have to create a huge volume, but you do want to create stuff that has value. And that's where you go back to the BuzzFeed and learn how to create good content that has value and that's really interesting. And then really this is kind of how everyone plays on this in the internet. You probably know how people do that. This is another piece from the Forrester that I like, which is assess the people, decide what you're trying to accomplish. Are you trying to drive prescriptions, increase test volume, increased awareness? You can do all of those things, but deciding what you're trying to accomplish is critical. Relationships will shift and change. There will be things that will happen, and you just have to be ready for that. And then and only then do you decide what technologies you're going to use to do it. For the most part, Facebook, Twitter, Google+, and YouTube, LinkedIn, those are the ones I use most of the time. And this is I have a whole post on my blog, 3 Wise Games, which is right down here at the bottom, and it specifically talks about creating a digital entity. I start with doing a name check, and it does a great job at doing an electronic check on all of the handles in different types of social media situations. You want to test it on these different networks, and I use Google services. That's my default, so I start there. And from that, I've been able to build some really fun digital entities, and I have a shared situation where people can work together. And this, by the way, over here is from Lee Acey, and he debuted this in 2009. This is aspirational, and I'm always trying to get to the point where I'm blogging once a week, and I'm posting a couple things every day. I'm really good at the bottom of this pyramid, and I train people to help me with the bottom of this pyramid. The top part of the pyramid, I will tell you, is challenging, especially when you have to get all your content through the regulatory systems that you have. Once you have all your assets, you've got all these different places, and you can see how they start to get really chaotic, but they also start to feed off of one another. So your corporate stuff is your basic stuff. The ability to share, it should be enabled. Having a presence on all the core social media networks is important, and some of the extra social networks. There's sort of the primary, and then there's these extra ones that you want to see if they make sense for you in your situation. So with that, John, I wanted to open it up.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Deb, great first section. We've invited Professor Shannon Threlkeld to help moderate this session. So, folks, if you've got any questions, feel free to type them in on the chat function. And Shannon, are you there, audio-wise? Okay, well, Shannon.
While we get Shannon. While we get Shannon, I do see there's a question from Darcy. Are there any liability concerns with patients interacting with hospitals and doctors on social media and email? Yes. So HIPAA, of course, is a privacy, HIPAA is the Health Portability and Privacy Act. It's updated, it's constantly new guidelines are being put out. Those HIPAA guidelines about personal health information, or PHI, is definitely something to keep an eye on. They keep iterating it, so it's definitely something you need to pay attention to. I just picked up a position paper from the Annals of Internal Medicine. It was published this year, and no, it looks like it was published last year, I'm sorry. And it is from the American College of Physicians. They do a very good job in their ever so academic way of physicians to summarize the types of activities, what the risks are, the benefits, and recommended safeguards. It's doable. There are also, there's a woman named Keeley Combs, Keeleykomes. She is a psychiatrist out of San Francisco, and I do have her, I mentioned her on one of my blog posts on Physician Google Thyself. She has a free, if you are a physician, you can download her social media engagement policies. So she's got some great stuff up on her site, and it's a great way for physicians to understand when they get engaged, how they should do it. Most people I recommend for physicians in hospitals have a branded page for your practice or your hospital, and when patients share, that's great. If they start asking very specific questions, find a way to take it offline. That's also true about rating sites. I hear a lot of physicians get kind of emotionally blackmailed by the idea that someone might rate them poorly and that person is inevitably crazy. Best way to handle it is to post, you got the crazy review, post, say, due to HIPAA privacy regulations, we want to move this conversation offline because we want to protect your personal health information. Please call our office and speak to so-and-so. We're waiting for your call. That will make that go away so fast. And because once people realize that they're revealing too much of their own personal privacy, that becomes an issue. And you showing them that you protect their privacy even when they're being mean to you.
I got a related question. I know you touched on a little bit about the regulatory restrictions in terms of working with your regulatory department. What about mobile health application developers? How should they, could they utilize some of the suggestions that you offered earlier, or are there any other specific items that they should consider?
Yeah. So I just happened to notice, I think it was last week, somebody posted, there's a set of, I don't want to say guidelines because I think I saw it, that it's being added to a bill in Congress right now that certain applications, mobile health applications, are being added to an exemption list on specific ways that they interact with patients. So I will tell you this space is evolving. No one has figured this out totally yet. I would say be cognizant of privacy. Probably the best way to handle it is I would look at patients like me. Patients like me, it was on my screen a little while ago, and they are a really good group. They started off as an ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease website, and they've since expanded to a much broader base of disease states. And I have to tell you, they do a terrific job moderating and doing a lot of things. History Sisters also does a great job at that. They tell you, use a different what do you call it? And be anonymous in the sense that come up with something like Apple's RI or something like that you would use no place else on the internet so that nobody can track it back to you. Right? We all get lazy about creating but recommendations to your users about how to protect their health information. That's what you need to do. You can't always legislate stupidity out of your system, right? It's like wearing helmets. Of course, you should wear a helmet, and when you're riding a bicycle or riding a motorcycle, but people don't, right? So do your best to tell people you're talking about your health. This is personal health information. We want to remind you, here's how you keep it private. You can take these recommendations. Here's how we do it. And like I said, History Sisters, patients like me do a really good job kind of coaching their members how to protect their own privacy. So if you're an app developer, I think you should follow that.
I thought I saw Shannon's microphone pop up for a second. Shannon, are you there? Do you want to add into the conversation or ask an additional question? Okay, well, let's be moving this along. I do have one follow-up question that is there that relates. I know a lot of stuff you talked about was dealing with providers and also dealing with device companies. I'm in the pharma business, and I was wondering, is there anything unique to the device business that we might think about in the pharma business in terms of social media? Since the work I've done in terms of researching social media in the pharma business is that the pharma business is way behind consumer, way behind device. Are there things that could be done, or maybe there are some good examples that you've seen already occurring in the pharma business?
So, John, I will tell you that pharma is actually way ahead of devices. So I'll disagree with you on that one, only because they have a lot more money and they have a lot more. There's a lot more at stake for them. So in some cases, they tend to do some really bold things. There's some wonderful patient communities that have been created in the pharma space, sponsored totally transparently by pharma companies. And I think they do a particularly good job of that. That's one place that they're doing well. Twitter, the epilepsy drugs, I think, have done a good job with this. And the place to go is Dose of Digital on their social media wiki.
Okay,
there are a ton of pharma examples in there. So I would go, yeah, so that's why I would go just to see what other people are doing. It's a voluntary thing. You don't have to contribute, but really just start looking at similar, if there's, usually most companies, you say, well, our business is kind of like this disease state or that disease state. Well, go research those other disease states, especially if they're bigger, like diabetes. If you can hook yourself to like diabetes or asthma or other big things and kind of look and see what the pharma companies are doing in those arenas, that'll give you a clue as to what you can do in your arena. And I would say the more niche your product, the better chance you have of patient engagement, because niches are the blessing of digital marketing.
In the interest of time, why don't we move on with the presentation, and then we'll come back for a few more questions on the back end. Okay, thanks. So what I'm going to do right now is go through kind of these are things that here's how I look at these different things. So when you're building a website, I mentioned use WordPress. WordPress is a blogging platform, and I have now built 3 or 4 websites on this. I can do everything I need to do, and I can edit my own site. I can put up my own posts. I can basically manage the content myself, and I can teach somebody else how to do it. I am not hooked to a big expensive agency to do this work. So that's one of the reasons I love it. It's also very reasonably priced. You just need to build what they call a theme. Build a theme, and it has all the structure that you need. Good Health is built on that. Third Eye Colonoscopy is built on that. Three White Veins is built on that. There's pretty much. It's funny because I can now find websites, and the first thing I do is right-click on them, inspect the element, and do a search to find WP. And I'm telling you, at least 70% of the time, I'm finding most websites are built on the WordPress platform, which is just great because the organic search that comes from building content in that platform
is second to none. It really is quite good. So the big thing that you should do is build it as responsive design. And what I mean by that is make sure that your site can be, you don't need to build a separate mobile site these days. All you have to do in WordPress is set your theme up to be responsive to whatever screen hits it. So whether it's your tablet, your desktop, your cell phone, it will modify itself. I encourage you guys to go view Word Help on your tablet, on your mobile device, your cell smartphone, and also on your desktop, and you'll see how the site it changes itself. I don't have to fart around with it; it just works. It's a great thing. It's been just a blessing to have that now as a common feature. This, by the way, is the back end. It looks a lot like a Word document when you're going in and editing content. Truly love this platform. Twitter. Most people know what it is. The trick on Twitter is tweeting on a regular basis and getting retweets. And engagement is really fun on this particular platform. What I did with third eye colonoscopy is I would do a hashtag of hashtag good for you. Now that's a hashtag that exists out on Twitter already, but I also combined it with the hashtag colonoscopy. And when I did that, I got some really great responses. So there were people who had been picking up their grandma from their colonoscopy, and then there were people who were going, excited that they were doing their bowel prep for their colonoscopy, and I just kept, good for you, good for you, good for you. And I did it as a hashtag, and it was a hashtag pat on the back for them raising the awareness about colonoscopy and colorectal cancer. So it was a great, fun little thing to do. It took me about 15, 20 minutes a day, although I will put in the commercial. March is Colorectal Cancer Awareness Month, so wear blue, wear stars, and go get your colonoscopies, or at least schedule one to have happen if you're of that age and that need to do that. So the real thing is that you get retweets. People will reply back to you really quickly. I found that I could do it, once a day in the afternoon on the West Coast, and that worked out pretty well. Twitter people, your audience may be different in terms of when they're using Twitter, but you'll figure it out. I just used to do a search, and I had one column that I would look up, which is colonoscopy, and that's how I pretty much found everything I needed. And I used TweetDeck, and I used TweetDeck because it is owned by Twitter, and that allowed me to kind of quickly scan and see what I needed to do. Facebook, it is ubiquitous. It is part of our culture now, and like I said, it's the fastest growing group of people. This is where your shared objects, so when your website and you hit the share this button, this is where a huge number of objects will go, and they will go onto Facebook, onto your page, and you can like other pages. And what I did here is, when I got here, I went and liked every one of my customer pages, and I went and liked all the patient advocacy groups, and I liked a whole bunch of other stuff that was relevant to acid reflux, GERD, heartburn, whatever I could find. And we post stuff there a lot, and we get some fun reactions. I happen to have trained someone how to do that, and she's just terrific. She has just the greatest eye for putting just the right spin on whatever it is that we post that's interesting. So I have to say that I like Facebook. I have not done as much with it here, but we're getting there. You can only do so much in a given day. So YouTube, can't go wrong with YouTube. Johnson & Johnson has one of the best channels out there. From a regulatory perspective, this is their what they say about their channel. They actually have multiple channels. So they have a master channel, and then they have a bunch of channels underneath. And just the long tail of this, look at this. This is just picked up. I did this, when did I pull this out? I think I pulled it out January of 2014, so this is recent numbers. Almost 7.8 million views of videos. And some of those videos go back 5 years. So, once you put it up out there, it's just, you can't go wrong. It's just great. So that's really great. And you can also enable comments. And in fact, I found some YouTube comments about our procedure on a different website. So I've actually got some posting I need to do. I'm going to take our FAQs. I specifically wrote them so that I could answer the questions that were over on there. And I'm going to use that information that I got through regulatory, just came out last week, and I'm going to copy and paste it over to the to this YouTube comments that I found. LinkedIn, do not overlook LinkedIn. I use it here to post updates about the company. It's a great place for finding groups, professional groups of people. Now, doctors, they're a little bit hesitant in LinkedIn unless they have a lot of commercial relationships. However, the nurses and the techs and the physician assistants, everybody else except someone who has comma MD after their name seems to be in LinkedIn. So you could create a group in LinkedIn. It doesn't cost you anything. You can lock the group down, and it's a great way to start building a professional community. It doesn't cost you anything. People have to go into LinkedIn anyway. It's a great way to get things going. I've built some alumni networks in LinkedIn, and I found that to be really a great way to, stay in touch with my professional colleagues. So I'm a big fan of using LinkedIn. Flickr is a great one to use. It's by Yahoo now, and they have some. I just was blown away that I could find 3D images that were of this high quality that were in Flickr. Just great. There's lots of communities. If you're in a business that has visuals that's key to whatever it is that you're doing, Flickr would be a great place. And now maybe Instagram and Pinterest would be added to that. The other one to consider is SlideShare. SlideShare is now owned by LinkedIn, and they will let you post PowerPoint decks as PDFs, PDF white papers, and also infographics. So it's a great opportunity to get your information out there, and people can take your presentation materials and kind of mix it all up. It's just a really good source for things, and it's a great source for competitive information. So I highly recommend searching that if you're doing some competitive research. So any of these things, of course, can be used for yourself and to look at your competitors. Here we go, Groundswell. These are 3 books that I think are great for you to look into. Crew Training Manifesto was written in the last century, and there's a great 8-page summary at this location, and it's 95 theses that takes off of the Lutheran theses. There's also Groundswell. I liked Groundswell because a third of the examples were healthcare related, and I really enjoyed reading this book. And again, this is a 5-year-old book, but it's got some really core things. When I was showing you the things from Forrester Research that came out of this book. So there's some things that they identified that I think are critical. And then back to Lee Acey, he's really focused on changing healthcare with social media. HubSpot, I love HubSpot. Go sign up for everything and anything. They did some trends last year, and I found this to be really true. I've highlighted the ones that I feel are relative to the healthcare industry. Be a content curator and be a human. I have a very specific voice that I use when I'm blogging as the brand, and I identify who I am, but I have a very specific voice, and I try to be conversational about it. And I find that I think really helps to make the content approachable. Get out of the dry, paper writing kind of stuff, because that doesn't engage anybody. Be a human being on the content side. And that's kind of one of the things that I've learned from watching HubSpot. I have a few other favorite resources, which SmartBrief, depending on which sector of the market you're in, SmartBrief is terrific. These are my gurus. I have written this post several times, and I love Dose of Digital. Social Media University Global is Lee Acey's night job, and his day job is social media at the Mayo Clinic. Ed Bennett is also a good one. And like I said, Pew Internet Reports, a great place to subscribe to continue to get great information. And that's it. Oh my gosh. What else can we do? What other questions did you get, Mr. John York?
Hey, Deb, I'm back here again, and I'm going to encourage folks who are still here. We've got about a dozen folks. If you have outstanding questions, I know Patik has been tweeting on this. Patik, maybe you can share some highlights. We have a wonderful opportunity here in terms of really picking Debbie's brains. So feel free at this point in time. Any thoughts? All right, well, Patik is typing in. I'm going to do a follow-on question that did come out here. And one is, how do you compete in an industry that works to challenge people out of their comfort zones with so many options and potential for misinformation?
I like to start in one place. Become the master of anything, which is sometimes the easiest place to start is Twitter, because you can't get into too much trouble with 140 characters, especially if you're retweeting clinical papers coming out of the New England Journal of Medicine. It's the easiest, simplest way to start. Feel comfortable in that arena, and then go into Facebook. That's the next easiest place to play, because again, you can find stuff from other places. It can be journal articles, it can be stuff out of USA Today, it can be things from Upworthy or Buzzworthy or whatever, and pull them in and paste them in, and as long as you have the ability to rebroadcast content around the disease state, for example, stay out of stuff that's directly related to your indication. Just start talking about the space. Be a voice in whatever the space is that you need to be a voice in. So if you're in my world right now, I'm in GERD, so I spend a lot of time talking about heartburn, reflux, and GERD. And we look at everything in that arena, and we try to retweet, repost, and, in the mix of that, we have our customers are doing things, we have things that come out, but really it's like a 90-10 rule. 90% of what we do is other people's stuff. It's the safest way to start.
That ties into another question that came through about 3 steps to starting to get going with social media. Patik has a question. Do you have any tips on how to stay consistent with your content creation? Seems to find it hard to post regularly with everything else on his plate.
So I have that same problem. I will tell you that, remember I mentioned before that in that pyramid, that is aspirational for me. I find that if I can write, if I get lucky and I'm either on an airplane or I get hit by inspiration in my muse and I start writing, write, and then I have to go and send it out to this doctor for a review or this expert internally. And then half of my job is really just getting it through, we use Agile, so just getting it through doc control. And then what's great about WordPress is that you can schedule your posts. So let's say you do a blast and you get 5 or 6 posts ready to go. You can schedule them to come out once a week for 5 weeks. And then you've just bought yourself some time. So I do try to batch process. That's one way. And the other thing is that I really try to be open about what you can post with. I've posted recipes. I've posted lists, question lists. One time, I took a post from a WNBR reporter from National Public Radio. She had this post that she asked 8 questions about colonoscopy. Well, one day I started writing answers to those questions, and I ended up with 3 posts out of it. And I had my medical director look at it, and then I had 3 weeks worth of posts that I got out of that one thing. So inspiration can come from anywhere, and try not to get so locked in. Remember, you're only looking for 200 to 500 words, really. And if you find something that goes longer than that, then break it up into more than 1 post. And then, bam, you go from having 1 week's worth of content to 2 or more. So that's kind of the way I do it. I would like to say that I'm really good about doing it every week, and I will tell you I'm not. I'm not good.
Fantastic.
Don't beat yourself up. Do the best you can.
Typing something. He'll probably have a question coming up. But we have a question that came in prior to the webinar. What does the day of a director of marketing look like? And what are the most important KPIs and metrics that you have to subscribe to in doing your job?
Right. So I'll start with the KPI question. I mentioned earlier that we have that funnel of information, and now that I've built my funnel, once a month at the end of the month, I go in and I make sure that I fill in those data, and I send it off to my boss. And we're doing what we can now in Salesforce to record which cases are coming potentially from our web work. So we're in the process of getting our sales reps to do that. But in the meantime, I have everything down to the phone call. So that's my key performance index. I keep a regular eye on how many new people are following me on Twitter, following us, liking our Facebook page, and if we're starting to get engagement. Those are I don't really report on that as much, but I do look at our traffic. We had, I do look at traffic overall, but I used to be more obsessed with it. I got to tell you, I'm not as much anymore. So let me go back to what a day in the life looks like. Usually when I get in, if I have a planned day and I don't have too many phone calls on tap, I like to take a look at what's going on in Twitter, in Facebook, and I really do try to keep it to 15 minutes per. We look at Google Alerts to see what's coming across and if there's something interesting, and I make sure that that gets up on the social channels. And I like to do that as early as I can. I typically spend a fair amount of time when I'm writing, not just writing original content and blog posts, but I do write a lot of templated documents. And this helps me because, for example, right now we're talking about the fact that we have 15,000 patients that have been treated with the TIF procedure. We have over 40 publications that studied over 700 patients. And so I'm writing documents right now so that I can plug those numbers in whenever I want. And every time I update them, I have them pointing back to documents that I consider my source documents. So as I've been touching different projects and different things that I've been doing, I've been trying to really templatize. I don't think that's a real word, but I wasn't an English major. I try to templatize where I can so that I can be nimble. I call it being nimble. I want to be able to make sure that I can stay nimble and active so that I can keep the content update and fresh as much as I can. So I don't want anything getting stale. The days of setting it and forgetting it are gone. So the trick is having a few things that you do and stay on top of those few things and just keep doing it over and over again. So I have yet to build an app for my sales team, but I do have an app actually built out from a storyboard perspective using PowerPoint. And I can't wait to, maybe in 2015 I'll get lucky enough and I can do an app. But I do know someone who does apps for salespeople all the time. She just loves it.
Super.
It makes her life so easy.
We have another question here from Jan. Since there's a lot of information online, how do you make sure that patients trust your information? And is there a way to stand out? So it's two questions in there.
Yeah, so I would say the way to stand out in the medical and healthcare space, and this is my bias, I like to have a conversational voice. So I'm now going back into the pages of the content at girdhealth.com. They were written a very sort of classic, and this is what GERD stands for, blah, blah, blah. I hate that. I like to say GERD. Acronym? And so I have a post called The Alphabet Soup of Reflux. Okay, that sounds more interesting than GERD stands for gastroesophageal reflux disease. So the other one that I did recently was I needed to do an anatomy lecture because I like to do not a lecture but an anatomy blog post. I have two of them, and what I did is the title was "Ever wondered why your stomach contents don't fall out of your body when you hang upside down?" And I have this little picture of a little kid hanging upside down. Okay, it's a lesson on anatomy, but it doesn't have to be boring, So imagine that you're talking to an 11-year-old. That's one way to kind of make sure that your content is engaging, is keep it simple, have a really great headline. I'm blessed with the ability to think in headlines, so I use that ability quite frequently. And then the other question is, patients will trust you if you reference things for them. So I have a very heavy reference section in my website. It's a special type of blog post. And what I do is I go to, if you go to gerdhealth.com and you go to the bottom it says references. And every article that I have, I reference where I got that data point. So I write it, I still, do the sort of academic exercise of making sure that everything is well referenced. But I take them to a page that is the abstract of that reference out of PubMed. Then I link them over to PubMed. That does a couple of things for me. One is it tells them that I care about getting the information right. The second thing it does is it gives me a whole base of material that's all content, keyword-rich content that I didn't have to write. And it's totally legal to use it because the abstracts for all publications are public domain.
That's a fantastic strategy.
So that's the quick answer on that.
And value added there. Any other questions at this point in time? I know we're going to be pushing up to quarter after hour, and I want to thank everybody for who stayed on. We have one from Shelley. She says, thanks for a great session, and I guess that sort of sums up probably everybody's. So anyway, Deb, fantastic. I always learn new things from you. I'm sure from our group, we've got a number of pearls to the group. We have this taped. We're going to put this out on a Dropbox, but I'm going to ask you guys to fill out an evaluation. So look for that in the next few days. I also have a PDF of her slides. If you have any questions for Debbie, do you have your email back up there for everybody? Okay, Deb?
You bet. I'm happy to take LinkedIn questions on LinkedIn as well as my email address, and I'm pretty easy to find, and John knows you can call me. I'm more than happy to. I'm really strangely geekily obsessed with this whole thing. So I love talking about it.
Thanks everybody for staying on a little extra. Enjoy your evening, Deb. Enjoy your evening. Again, we look forward to seeing everybody at the next webinar. Will be in April. And if you have a chance to fill out the evaluation when I close out the meeting, we definitely appreciate it. So take care and have a great evening. Bye now. And thank you, Deb.
Good night, everybody.